spotlighting Hawaii's leaders.
We want to bring in Governor David E.
Good morning, Mr. Mayor.
Lieutenant Governor, good morning. Thanks so much for joining us. Mayor Derek Kawakami.
Thank you so much, Senator, for being here.
Spotlighting the issues.
Where is the virus right now in our community?
How much is this overall going to cost the state?
How are you responding to the community's concerns? Talk about the level of citations that you guys are writing.
Spotlight Hawaii with Yunji Denise and Ryan Kalei Suji on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Longstrugs.
Good morning. Thanks so much for tuning in here on this Monday morning and starting your week off with us. I'm Ryan Kalei Suji, joined by Yunji Denise, and this is Spotlight Hawaii on the digital platforms of the Honolulu Star-Advertiser. This morning, we welcome in a guest that always has a lot to say. We have a lot of questions, and we normally run out of time, but always a great show.
Same expectation this morning. We head over to Honolulu Hale. We're joined live now by Mayor Rick Blangiardi. Mr. Mayor, thank you for being here.
Good morning, Yunji. Good morning, Ryan. Yeah, it's good to be with you guys. You know, there's like Sunday night football, and then there's Monday with Yunji and Ryan. Monday morning, with it's like that. Yeah,
that's right. Well, we've got a lot to cover today. I want to start with the items that really dominated the headlines last week. That was Dean Uchida's departure at DPP. That department has seen its share of corruption scandal and, of course, a ton of vacancies. But it is such an integral part of our city. It serves such a vital function. Tell us a little bit about the departure, your thoughts on that, and how you hope to move that department going forward.
Yeah. Okay. Well, look, candidly speaking, I said in the release, I had the utmost respect for Dean, appreciation and gratitude for an incredible body of work the past 20 months. We have a different philosophy and a belief on the road ahead. That said, I don't typically talk about personnel actions, but I will say this. Department of Planning and Permitting, aside from the fact that there's one thing that's keeping me up at night, it's that, is absolutely vital. I don't think I can overstate how important it is to our economic recovery. And, from the standpoint of both short-term and long-term aspects. So the good news is we've been investing money now only recently at the start of this fiscal year in July. And we're about to make some significant investments in technology, in people, in restructuring and organizing, et cetera. So, it's been really challenging in these first 20 months to understand coming into office that this was somewhat the holy grail on what needed to be fixed, and then met with corruption and investigations and everything else early on in our tenure. I'm confident on the road ahead. The question is how fast we can operate. I do think that when we get our technology in, which should be within 6 weeks, we're going to be able to get out of very quickly all the pre-screening phase, be able to get that handled within 24 hours. We have a backlog now of some 4,500 applications. There's just a lot to do. The city gets some 20,000 applications a year. We haven't had the manpower to process that. That's created long delays. There's been other aspects to what goes on in DPP that we're working through from a management and leadership standpoint. And so, it's a very complicated, very involved situation. I'm very confident in Dawn Takeuchi Apuna, who has been our deputy director all these many months, to step in right now as our interim director and a team of people around her to move forward. And I have a lot of confidence in that. We already have seen some really good signs there, which we were for the last month or so. So, look, it's a conversation that comes up with me with almost everybody and anybody I talk to. So it's really forefront. And so we're making every effort we can to get this right.
When it comes to this department, you spoke of the technology that's coming that will help with the backlog. Was it more about the technology and the implementation of the process, or is it about the leadership in the department that is causing these delays, or a combination of both?
Now, I'm not going to put anything off on leadership here. When you talk about technology, this is one of the things that we look, the city did a forensic audit in 2019. It was presented to the prior administration in January of 20. COVID came in March. Nothing ever got done with that. That's what we walked into. It had been underinvested in technology for a long time, underinvested in people. People going out knew the department didn't have the best morale as a result of that. People were overworked, fatigue, all of that stuff. When you talk about that stuff, Ryan, that's sort of, from a leadership standpoint, that starts with my office, okay, on how we want to address that issue and who's doing it. So money is going to be a solution to part of this. Obviously, you need money to hire people. We've approved the hiring of 160 people, 80 this year, 40 replacements, 40 brand new positions, existing openings that we had. And we're just going to go forward from there. It takes money to do that. The same thing with the technology that we just invested in. We spent a lot of time going through procurement, making sure we were going to buy the right system here that could facilitate and execute, if you will, the processing of all of this stuff. We're looking into other matters with self-certification, with architects, and there's just a lot of things we're looking at and trying to make decisions on as quickly as possible that will streamline these delays, which are very costly. We know that from the simplest home remodel all the way to building a major building. I mean, it's impacts everybody. And so, the sense of responsibility on this to get some really great short-term wins that are significant while we go about building the longer-term stuff is what we're about right now.
You spoke about the hiring process, and that is something that you have said that you're frustrated with in the past when it comes to the city. Certainly very different than your time in private industry where you can hire and fire someone within a matter of weeks, if not days. The city's process is months long. How are you progressing in cutting down that time and being able to be a little more nimble and compete with the private sector? Because the jobs at DPP and the other agencies that have vacancies, these are not, these jobs require certifications and trainings, and in many cases, graduate school and beyond.
Well, first of all, it was hard for me to comprehend, not even coming from the private sector. You could have an entity, let's just use a round number, the city employee base of 10,000, if you will, that really was void of any recruiting efforts, and so the city has not been known for recruiting. In fact, going back, it's not just months. Average time it took to hire somebody was 6 months, 180 days. I mean, that's highly dysfunctional in any setting and really takes you out of the game. I mean, I can't tell you how many stories that we heard where we had 14 candidates at one point, and then we finally got into the hiring position. Through all the processes, we were left with one or two and sometimes none. How many times that's happened, right? So no recruiting. And then the obvious extension of that was very little in the budgetary lines that we were looking at. You take on a nearly $4 billion operating budget. I'm talking about the operating, not the capital. And then very little in the way of training, development, and retention, for retention, if you will. So, any organization that's 10,000 people that isn't recruiting, that doesn't have lines in there for training and development people in today's world is out of touch. And then to make it even worse is that we had very little succession planning, almost none. In fact, there are huge voids in the succession planning, and that liability is exacerbated by the fact that 15% of our employee base, which is right now about 8,600, 15% of that is past the age of retirement. So if you look at that from any objective standpoint as far as how to run a business, knowing full well that we have, probably more than 2,000 key openings. We have 3,000 vacancies, but if you were to ask me of that number, what do we really need? And we need about 2,000 of those in just 5 departments, and I'm not even including the 300 plus we need in the police department. So, you can't really effectively operate. It compromises the leadership, but also I've been on record as saying we don't want to be an administration that makes excuses on why things don't happen. So that's what we're trying to address. And this is a long-term solution. We're not going to get it done right away. But one of the first things that we did do is we told our management team that, we're going to reduce the time it takes to hire from 60 days, 6 months down to 90 days. And we're in the process of doing that. So a couple of good news things. One, I think you're all familiar with Forbes. They come in every year and they rate the marketplace. They rate 10 businesses in Hawaii or 10 entities. They do 70,000 nationally. It's sort of like the Good Housekeeping seal of approval. Well, the city and county came in number 2 this year as best places to work behind Hawaiian Airlines, but came in number 1 in government. Okay, so we know we've got a nice backdrop to be recruiting, if you will. And then you add to that the fact that now that we've actually started recruiting, just to give you a couple of highlights, we've upped our applications now in Rex because of the engagement, if you will, from our management team to almost triple from what it was a year ago. But we just put out for a trades apprentice position a 3-day recruitment effort. We had 385 applicants for the Board of Water Supply, which we're really gratified by. And then we went after EMT positions, and we had 465 applicants because we started recruiting for EMT, which is really a really important job. And there are other things here. I've got a whole bunch of notes, but just let you know, it starts with recruiting. There's an old adage that says people go where they're invited. The fact that the city almost operated like it was a private country club and then made it very arduous, difficult to even get hired through that whole process doesn't make sense. So nobody ever talked about staffing during a campaign. It's not a campaign issue. But I'll tell you, when you come in and you look at, and you say, what's the functionality? How do we operate? And you start to see this stuff. We need to address it, and we are addressing it. We're doing everything we possibly can. We did all the diagnostics on it. We understand where the bottlenecks were. There was a lot of myth assigned to the fact that it was always HR's problem or was tied up in budget and fiscal services. Not the case. We've been able to break it down systemically. I don't want to take up the whole half hour on this. It's a complicated issue, but it's a major contribution to the city. I've said to our team, with all the other things that we have to take on, from homelessness to the rail to affordable housing to elder care to public safety to infrastructure issues, all of that, it's tough to say when you look at that what's even more equal. They're all priorities. We're taking on a lot. But the two things that add to all of that we're really focused on is this staffing issue, because it directly involves performance and our ability to deliver core city services, not the least of which is the engagement of a workplace and what it feels like to work with people and have enough people to be able to get the job done and work on morale and everything else. And the other part is modernizing the city. We just put in $16 million into IT. Just now, the city hasn't invested in IT in the last decade. We did a press release probably a month ago or whatever, but that's hard for me to comprehend that in the third year of the third decade of the 21st century, that we weren't investing in IT all along, and that the modernization of our city, in not only the technology sector, but the other aspects of it, because that has to get into a cultural thing too. It's those people that work with it, and how do they employ that technology, and where does it lend itself to making things more convenient? And we've seen some really good examples of it. I think we've done a lot with DMV. In fact, I just got my license renewed. I went in and I didn't want anybody to know. I think the girl at the desk knew I was the mayor when I walked up there, but the process was great. I was in and out of there in 15 minutes. I had an appointment, at a lower queue, and went in there. I sat in there in the waiting area. I was there for like 5 minutes, and next to my appointment. And we're just starting to see things like that manifest themselves. And in this job, we say we always run out of time. I feel like I run out of time, Ryan, every day. There's just it's like that. It's just there's so much to be done, and so you just keep going with it. But that's the gratification in this job, is the fact that we can do a lot of good. And this team that we brought in, I continue to have great confidence in.
Well, we appreciate the upgrades to the IT, because your stream is much clearer for us prior people that have been in that office when we tried to get a live feed. So we appreciate those upgrades. Let's switch gears here. Another thing that was discussed last week was your Safe and Sound program that you announced with leaders in Waikiki, just to kind of crack back and really tackle the crime that we're seeing in the area, similar to what is happening in the Weed and Seed in the Chinatown area. If you can explain just briefly some of the highlights about that program and what you hope to accomplish, knowing that there are a lot of concerns from residents and tourists now about the crime that we're seeing in the area.
Yeah, well, I want to start off, first of all, and compliment and acknowledge both Chief Joe Logan, our new police chief, and Steve Arm, because, I asked a question earlier about leadership, and I said it starts in this office. One of the things I was really determined to do was to have a high-level functioning relationship with both the police department and the prosecutor's office when it comes to facing crime. And in fact, for that matter, we've also enlisted, to the extent we can, the judiciary. And I think you saw that we were able to get, the release program weekdays waived. So now anybody who is arrested has got to face a judge and somebody from the prosecutor's office the next day. We want to be able to get that in weekends. But look, we don't want to duck the major areas. Chinatown, for what it was historically, became a haven for a lot of illegal activity. We began first and foremost there. We needed to be able to gear up some, as you know, to be able to take on Waikiki. But now that Waikiki has come back, the Safe and Sound program is really in its function no different than Weed and Seed. That had to do with the name Weed and Seed. And I don't know if it's a copyright issue or whatever. We had to have a different name. We weren't trying to confuse the subject. But the bottom line to all of this is these characters that are walking around, we've got long rap sheets, who've had their hands slapped, their wrists slapped or whatever, misdemeanor after misdemeanor, short jail terms for felonies, etc., but are out there who are just creating havoc. I have zero tolerance for that. None. And especially in an area like Waikiki, or for that matter, what we owe the residents and the people who work, and for that matter, people who visit and want to enjoy Chinatown, we owe them the same thing. So we're cracking down on these two areas. There's a couple of other areas in the island too that we're working on. But to me, Waikiki is sacred ground. It is it's a really key part of our economic engine and tourism. And anybody that comes to Waikiki, I don't care if it's a tourist or if it's a local person. I was just down there the other night at a function for Catholic Charities, and be able to get down there. A lot of local people go there. Local people want to go there and work there as well, as far as and go and enjoy themselves. That place needs to be a place where you go and you can feel safe. Our job one is public safety. So that's what that's about. And so we're going to be arresting people. I think you read Steve Arm's editorial in your paper last week, lamenting the fact that, we really need the judiciary to help us with the geographic restrictions. Our batting average in that has not been good. We want, when they get arrested, we want them out, and we want them out of the area. We don't want them coming back in. So if you want to know what I'm about, and I've told these guys this, and there's nothing to do with my chronological age, and I hesitate to even use the expression about being old school, but I'm old school on that. I really do. You hurt somebody, you threaten somebody, you steal, you do something, there's a consequence to that. And we're not going to look the other way. And it's amazing because these people hide out in quote unquote homeless community. We just got some really bad characters that are just gravitate there because of the vulnerability of the people who are there, and they feel that they can prey on that. I don't like that at all. And starting from my office and with the police department and with our prosecutor's office, we're going to do something about that. We already have begun.
Well, and that's a natural segue to talk about homelessness. We did have Dr. Ireland on here a few weeks back, along with the head of the CORE program, and they were talking about a lot of the successes that program seems to be having. However, there is a bottleneck when it comes to assisting the chronically homeless and getting them to where they need to be. Dr. Ireland had mentioned the hope of one day perhaps having another city shelter, or perhaps, a private entity opening a shelter for city residents. Where can you tell us in terms of where we are on that?
Well, that's absolutely right on the point too. And there are things that we're doing right now in the acquisition of shelters. And in fact, we just bought across the street on Pauahi Street, downtown Chinatown, what was the equivalent of, I forget how many thousands of square feet. We're going to put up a treatment center. It's actually going to be called the Homeless Program, the HOME program, which is a homeless outreach medical education, but it's tied in with JAPSON. And so we're going to be able to have medical treatment. It's going to be a 6-bed shelter, but it's going to be a treatment facility that mitigates, when we pick up people, a lot of where they don't need to go to the emergency rooms and saving that cost. So we're going to be able to have that contained right across the street from Pauahi, where the CORE headquarters are. And we should have that ready by November 1st. But we are in the process right now. We have letters of agreement out there of trying to buy some facilities. I know that Jim talks also about the state hospital as being one outlet, but we're trying to get some others. We're in negotiations right now in Wahiawa for a facility that would allow us that. We need to have places to take these people, but we also need places like the one we're going to set up downtown, and what is going to be a great, really efficient way to go, because the medical students at JAPSON are going to be, and even residencies who are already doctors, are going to be getting ongoing training working in this setting, both with physical injuries and psychological and psychiatric injuries as well. I'm excited about that. And so, but we need those places to take people. We can only do so much in street medicine, which is what CORE's been doing. And it's a very complicated scenario. But I really like CORE program. I think, and Jim was going to text me back, I think we continue to add to our staff. We will be adding to our vehicles. I think we're doing this humanely. We're doing it sort of individual by individual. I think we've cleaned up a lot of areas, but as we all know, it's a big and complicated problem. But having places where we can actually provide treatment is great. And then you add to that the holidays, like what Twinkle Borges has out in Waianae and James Koshiba has out there, and then Auntie Blanche in Waimanalo, and whether or not the city can come up with something like that. Certainly, with Dwayne Carisa's project out there, all we're looking at doing anything and everything we can to take homeless people off the street, take care of them physically, mentally. I mean, look, most of the people that are on the street, more than about 50%, I'm always hesitant to throw out the statistics, 45% is what I think I actually read. They've been on the street 10 years or more. These are people, the very high percentage are mentally ill or have some form of addiction, drug or alcohol or otherwise. These are people who it's not easy to deal with. It's a real challenge in dealing with, and that living on the street is a way of life for them. So you just can't just suddenly pick them up and relocate them. But I think the things we're doing to build trust, to gain, to be able to take them places, because they are people, and I've said it repeatedly, a street is not a home. And we're making progress. Our whole new project is a great transitional facility. We're just approaching this very aggressively on a lot of fronts, but differently than what we did before, in providing services and having people that can do that, and having a strategy that doesn't make the police department the tip of the spear. Police officers are not trained for that, and for that matter, overrunning our emergency rooms at the hospitals. And we're starting to have a real big impact on that.
Want to switch gears again and get to another topic I'm sure you enjoy talking about, and that's the rail. Many residents on the west side of the island are seeing it more and more with the test runnings that are currently underway.
Right.
Wondering if you can present some sort of timeline of when riders may actually be able to get on this train and ride it to some segment of, the Pro City area or Aloha Stadium. What is that timeline looking like right now?
Okay, well, first of all, the trial running part of this, right? It's happening right now. It started a couple weeks ago. Is really unique here in Hawaii. It's really important because if you recall, this is the first automated rail system in the country. And so, from that regard, this trial running part is more significant, and we wanted to be sure everything is correct. And as you well know from your prior discussions, things have happened along the way that we've had to fix things that it wasn't part of the new construction. This goes back in the early stages of things, and all of that now seemingly is in place. So it's my belief that sometime in the first quarter of 2023, sooner rather than later, and we were prepared to do it this year in the fourth quarter for as far as taking over operating and maintenance, but it doesn't look like that's going to happen under the circumstances, that we will be doing this first quarter of 23. Answer your question.
I want to delve a little bit into the world of politics. We are
why do you want to talk about politics?
We're on the cusp of choosing a new governor. Do you have a preference as to who takes the fifth?
Well, don't ask me that. Who's running for governor anyway? Come on.
You tell us.
No, I like all the candidates. The only one I don't really know is the lieutenant governor for Duke Iona. I don't know him. But I've had the greatest respect for Duke. I have great respect for Josh, and I worked together a lot on homelessness when he was just a senator before he ever decided to run for lieutenant governor. Not just a senator, as a doc and a senator, but we did a lot of work together over the years. I certainly have great respect for Sylvia Luke. I think I'm encouraged by the fact that we've got good men and women who want to step forward in these really challenging times, in these really pivotal leadership roles. My attitude about whomever gets elected would be the extension of what we've tried to do in here already. One, I've already alluded to the fact we've built a really good working relationship with the police department and the prosecutor's office. I can tell you that the history of that speaks for itself. I'm not here to denigrate the past or anybody involved with that, but that's a very different dynamic than we have going on right now. I can tell you that my working relationship with City Council, and this is true of our administration, and with Tommy Ward as the chair, is in a very solid place. And I think you can see that evidence. The public doesn't have to see that kind of acrimony. We don't always agree. We've voted on things, but we've been very successful so far in working creatively and collaboratively with city government, with the City Council. Well, it would also be true for me, and I can tell you that I've had a chance to tell both candidates, I think the table is set for unprecedented collaboration between the city and the state, and what I perceive to be as something that's really been needed. Now, in all honesty, COVID has overshadowed a lot of what we've done in the first 20 months. I mean, really more than the first year of operation. And I thought that our relationship in working with Governor Ige and the State Department of Health was also very positive. I think we came in early, changed the whole tone of that. There was no dissenting positions. We understood where our lane was. We stayed there, worked out a cooperative relationship. But I can tell you, in our dealings with the state, so far, it has been very, very positive. We've kept that positive. You stop and think about it. I mean, I've even done press conferences with Scott Psyche and in the past, which I can tell you didn't go on before. And the governor and I think, have had a very good working relationship as well on a number of issues. We've done a number of joint press conferences as well. And all of that has not been for show. All of that has been very real in earnest at this point. So now with a change in leadership and looking at our administration, now that we're somewhat seasoned and got our feet on the ground, past a lot of the COVID distraction, beginning to get traction and momentum, the synergies between the city and state working together as opposed to silos has unlimited potential. And I want to tap into that. And I promise both of them, it's not going to be any ego on our end here. We want to be able to sit at a table, work creatively, work collaboratively with the resources the state has, with the resources we have as a city, with the team that we have in place to make good things happen. That's how we're looking at it.
And just briefly on that, same topic of changing of guards, we are seeing a number of seats in the city council that, obviously could be a lot different people are going to be in place next year with a lot of those seats up for grabs. Your thoughts about the makeup of the council overall? I mean, you've spoken on this program about the relationship that you've had moments ago. You just said you have a good relationship with the city council. Moving forward with these new members potentially coming in, how do you think that will change the dynamics between your office and the city council?
Well, it's probably no different than it was 20 months ago when we first walked in, because everything was new to me then, right? So they're going to shuffle the deck somewhat. It seems to me anybody and everybody who's running for city council right now that got past the primary, all have a lot to offer. I've talked to a couple of them. I don't really have, I don't have any skin in the game here. We'll have to see who gets elected. But I think at the end of the day, it's like I said earlier, we don't always agree, but you take the time out, out of respect for their responsibilities, understanding full well that they want to represent their districts and what their agendas are, and to work through some of the initiatives that we're trying to do, and to create that collaboration. At the same time, stay open-minded to what they might have in mind from the standpoint of what they want to get done, and see if we can't make that work. I know we worked through so many challenging things in the last 20 months, whether it was on the opera relief money or other major issues, on some of the bills that we got passed that some of the council members really felt strongly about. And, it's, to me, that's the environment I come from. You talk about the business and government sector. To me, it's about how do you make things happen? It's about, understanding how to be collaborative. At the same time, how to hold your ground on stuff that you're principled about and you understand perhaps is the better idea. And how do you sell that through? And how do you get that buy-in? It's like that. And we approach it like that. It's not like, we're not in this. That's why I joked with Yunji when you said, let's talk about politics. It's not like this is government. I fully recognize that. But it's also people working together with the best ideas and trying to do the most good. So I'm not trying to oversimplify it. Like I said, we don't always agree. But at the end of the day, reasonable people can come to an agreement. And we've worked on that.
We are just about out of time. We still have many issues, but we didn't get to get to them.
This was the 1 hour version. I didn't get a chance to talk about all the things we're doing. How about the Little League Parade, first of all?
Well, let's end with that. That has to be one of the wonderful things about being the mayor, is that you get to honor a team that had done so well. Tell us about that in our last question this morning.
Well, look, we couldn't do enough for them, because this town, our state, fell in love with them. The way they played, made us so proud. Not only did they dominate the other teams, but they did it with humility. They did it with great sportsmanship. They did it with aloha spirit. And I was watching these kids, and the more I was watching them, they started to look on TV bigger and bigger. And then when I went out to the airport to meet them, when they flew in, they're a bunch of little kids, but but that's understandable. You know that, but they played larger than life. They looked so good. And so we just simply said, especially in this post-COVID environment, there wasn't a city in the world that wouldn't want to trade places with us, to have the world champions. And we simply said, let's just do this bigger and better than it's ever been done before. And the joy of that was calling up the various people and asking for cooperation. We didn't ask for any money from anybody, although a number of businesses have helped donate monies to offset their travel expenses. But anybody and everybody we called, whether it was the businesses downtown that I asked to let their employees out of work so we could have people on the sidelines cheering the team on, because you can't have a parade without spectators, but also the bands themselves. I mean, starting with our own Royal Hawaiian Band. I called the Marine Corps. We just wanted their color guard. They brought the color guard and the band. We had bagpipes there. We had Kamehameha schools, Mililani High School, Pearl City High School, and even the University of Hawaii. I mean, they told me to stop calling the bands. We already have enough bands. There's only so much you can put in a 1 mile thing. And then the beauty of it all, and Scott Hubbard, I give him great credit, had the brilliant idea with the Louisville Slugger, and we called Louisville guys that make the Major League bats, and asked if it was possible to get these bats done. We only had 8 days to prepare for this, whether or not they could do that. They had watched these kids play. They had loved them. They said they loved the request. They stopped what they were doing. They literally made bats, Major League bats for each kid. It's got his name on it, his number, Little League World Series champions, genuine. And we were able to get those. They arrived 2 days before via FedEx. It was incredible that they did that. We gave each player, and along with Coach Oda, we gave him a key to the city, recognizing the 2018 and the 2022 championship. All of that to say, I can't talk this fast. This deserved for us all to be joyous. And we wanted to create for this city here, we wanted to extend that feeling of joy everybody had after they won, and make it across the board to show these kids, their families, the coaches, everybody involved with that effort, how much it was appreciated, how much it was respected, and how much we love them. And I think we achieved that. And hopefully we brought a little bit of hope and joy to the city too.
Yeah, well, when you're regarded as one of the greatest teams of all time to play, it deserves a celebration like that. So we thank you for putting that together, and congratulate you and your team for doing such a great job under a short amount of time as well. You said 8 days.
Team did a great job. I swear to you, it looked like I don't think it could have come up any better if we had 6 months to prepare. They got it done in 8 days. I'm so proud of them. It was great. It was joyous.
Yeah, well, thank you, Mayor, for updating us on all the many things that are happening there at Honolulu Hale. Always
We're
a
going to
pleasure.
expand the show to an hour. I never have enough time with you guys. I'm just getting warmed up. You haven't even heard my side.
Your wish is our command next month.
Okay. All right.
Thanks so much, Mayor. Aloha.
Thank you very much.
So much energy from the mayor today. You really see a lifted spirit there as he talks about a lot of the challenges. I mean, of course, the victories there and getting to honor that team. What a wonderful moment for all of us across the state. And then also talking about some of the challenges. We started off our conversation talking about DPP and the departure there of the department head. But he says he is moving forward. There was a difference in leadership style there. He thanked Dean Uchida for his service, but also saying that he wants to change the way that department works. He recognizes that it's one of the cornerstones of the city. He says everywhere he goes, people are talking to him about that backlog of permits. It's something that he's committed to, cutting through. And one of the big things he talked about is innovation there when it comes to technology.
Yeah, and how the support staff itself in the department can also help. And that, of course, has become an issue. And you heard him at length talk about some of the challenges and what they are trying to do to help to create an environment where people want to work at the city and county of Honolulu by eliminating some of the processes, by expediting some of those procedures to get people onboarded, recognizing that, as he said, it was listed as the #2 most desirable place to work in Hawaii. And so they are trying to do all that they can to help with the labor shortage issue, the labor issues that they're having within the various departments there, saying that ultimately it should become a big issue and should be a focus, because it will then impact all the departments and their ability to service people and community safety as well. We also heard from him about Waikiki and that Safe and Sound program that was implemented and just announced last week as well.
Yeah, and you heard him talk about the synergy that his office has with the prosecutor's office and the chief of police, the three agencies really working together, and to some extent also with the judiciary to try to crack down on what he is basically calling serial criminals who get a slap on the wrist again and again, and trying to weed those folks out and really get them off the street and get them, the punishment that they obviously deserve. On the other side, we also talked about homelessness. He said that some of those bad actors really sort of seek cover in homeless communities. One of the things that he's working on with Dr. Ireland is working through the CORE program and trying to help the folks who are chronically homeless. He noted a statistic that I had not heard before, which is pretty stunning, that about half of the people who are on our streets have been homeless for a decade or more. And so that's a very challenging thing. It's not just a matter of creating a shelter space, although that is something that they're working on, but really these are much deeper issues. To that end, he talked about the home program that they are working on with the medical school to create a 6-bed space on Pauahi Street, right across from the Corps headquarters, where JABSOM students can help to service chronically homeless folks who may have injuries. We hear a lot about wound care and the needs there, and sort of cutting that route to Queens and sending them over to Pauahi Street instead, hopefully cutting down the cost and really getting these people the services they need.
And finally, of course, one of the other things we talked about was rail. The mayor saying that we could be looking at a timeline of first quarter of next year when riders will be able to ride the rail. We're going to actually be diving deeper into the rail in an upcoming conversation.
That's right. On Wednesday, Lori Kahikina will be here. We're going to be asking her about how that 90-day trial is going. As you know, when they do the 90 days, if there's any errors, the 90 days reset. So they have to have 90 clean days of route service, doing all the safety checks. This is such an exciting project. You know, a lot of eyes on us for this because it is a driverless system. And, you know, there's been some issues, of course, with the columns and the concrete cracking. And we're going to talk to her about that, but also just finding out about how that trial is going and when she expects to turn it over to the city. He did say that they would be ready in the last quarter of this year, but most likely it will be sometime in January or beyond.
Yeah, so looking forward to that conversation with Lori Kahikina right here on Wednesday. We hope you'll tune in for another episode of Spotlight Hawaii. We thank the mayor and we thank you for joining us this morning. We'll see you right back here on Wednesday. Aloha.
Aloha.
This episode of Spotlight Hawaii is brought to you by Long's Drugs.